Good morning, Year 12. I'm going to try and get through some of the theory for you for Cluster D. That's the form working task. Has two competencies in it, and I've got them up on a screen next to me here so I can keep up with them because I don't have a paper copy of the task here either. First one is the erect and dismantle formwork and footings for slabs on the ground. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and go through each of the elements and the performance criteria just in lecture format. With some of the performance criteria there will be dot points which will be a little bit more specific and talk about tools, so I'll try and do some additional videos maybe down in the yard with some of the tools that I've got so we can put it through together. But there's basically four elements within the competency. First one is plan and prepare, which is similar to just about any other competency, and the fourth one is clean up. So it's the ones in between that are very specific to the cluster or to the competency. So when I look at first element, plan and prepare, the performance criteria for erecting and dismantling formwork. First one talks about work instructions, plan specifications, quality requirements, details, that they're obtained, confirmed and applied from relevant information to undertake planning and preparation. So this is nothing to do with doing the job yet. This is all about getting ready to do the job. So you'll have building plans that you'd have to refer to. You might have council regulations that you'd have to refer to. You'd have slope plans because you might have something like that on the site that you're on. You've got specifications for the concrete that you're going to be using, because the concrete required for a footpath is very different to the concrete required for a garage slab or a house slab, and that's even very different to the requirements for a suspended slab. The strength of the concrete is very varied for all those sort of things, and the thickness of the slabs. Footpaths only usually need about a 50mm slab. Driveways, maybe 100mm. House slabs can be from about 150 to larger. You might have like 100mm at one corner, but generally they'll have a larger footprint for them. And so you'll also have plans that you need to look at which will show you how the slab needs to be set out, where there needs to be trenches dug, where plumbing might need to come into it, any under slab electrical work that might need to come in. The only plumbing that should need to come in is the drainage, because that's got to go out through under the floor. Things for showers, some laundries, bathrooms, those sort of things, toilets, unless they get designed around the corner of the house, where sometimes those sort of plumbing things can go out through walls, but quite often they've got to go through a concrete floor. Second performance criteria, your safety OH&S requirements in accordance with the plans and policies. So if you're doing slabs on the ground, most of the safety requirements for there will be to do with lifting and moving heavy objects around, trips and falls and that sort of stuff. If there's going to be excavations done, there could be a fairly significant fall issue there. And so you've got to watch out for, because of that, you may need to do other things around the site, different tapings off, different signage, barricades, safety caps on top of pegs and those sort of things, so that you don't have people not seeing them and tripping over a steel peg. That leads us into the third criteria, which is safety signage and barricades, that you identify them and you implement them. So you go, okay, we're working on a site, there's a lot of other people here that have nothing to do with our concreting, so we need to make sure that we've got safety signage around that alerts them to the fact that we might have excavations, or that we might have a cement truck coming in. You'll have barricades so that people don't walk into those sort of areas, especially if you're doing concreting where there's a lot of public involved or nearby. Not so prevalent when there's a new construction in a new housing development, because usually at that point there's hardly any public in, but there are other people coming in, site inspectors, other trades, anything like that. So you need to make sure you've got those safety signs and those sort of things all set up. If you're involved in civil construction where you're doing footpaths and roads or large buildings and you're around the city, then you've got to have extra safety requirements and signage around for the public in that sense. Fourth performance criteria: plant, tools, equipment selected to carry out the task consistent with job requirements. Check for serviceability. Any faults rectified. Okay. Basically, you need to make sure that before you get onto the job, you have every piece of plant or equipment that you need to use for that job. You're looking at tools such as saws for cutting all of your formwork, your drills for driving in screws for attaching all your formwork together, hammers if you're using nails. You might need hand saws as well. With your electric saws, you might need on-site drop saws. You might need to have a handheld circular saw. Jigsaws might be required. An on-site power saw, like a table saw, for ripping down formwork if you need to. So you need to make sure that's the sort of equipment that you have listed for creating your formwork. In addition to the tools for doing your formwork, you'd obviously need to have shovels as well for digging out the site, because you might have to do that by hand. You probably can't do that. If they've got a bobcat, then that's something that comes in. But again, that's something that needs to be checked. You need to make sure that that is serviceable and safe and ready for work. So you need to make sure that you've got all of those ready before you go onto site. So you have a big list of everything when you're doing a job site a job safety analysis or a work safe method statement. So you'll have all those sort of things in there listed. You need to make sure that they check them for serviceability. I will do a little bit on this with the tools downstairs. You make sure that your shovels aren't covered in old cement and that sort of stuff, because hopefully you've cleaned them all off beforehand. You want to make sure that your drill, your power drill, if you're going to use a power paddle to mix things, that the power cords are serviceable, that there's no cracks in the casing. So that's all the sort of things that you need to make sure that you do when you're engaging in this competency, basically. Material quantity requirements are calculated in accordance with plan specs and quality requirements. That's number 5. Lots of different materials that you need to consider. Formwork. You need to make sure you've got all the correct formwork before you go on site. You can usually chop and change pieces to make your formwork to adjust to different things on site, but you need to make sure that you have the absolute, more than the minimum requirement for formwork. So if you've got a slab, you need to make sure that you measure the entire perimeter of that slab, the entire outside edge, and that you have more formwork than what you need for the job. And if the formwork is higher in some spots, that may dictate the type of formwork you use. If it's a slab that's flat on the ground, you may be able to get away with just having treated pine or hardwood as a form. If it's going to be a larger slab like a house, then you might need to use form ply so you can get the higher sides. And if I take the example that I had out in my backyard, one section of my formwork would have been almost 900 mil high, so I had to make sure that I had a wide enough piece of plywood to make that form. And I'll try and give you a link to some of that video as well, or I'll edit some of those things into it as well. 1.6, so performance criteria of this first element. Materials appropriate to the work are identified, obtained, prepared, safely handled, and located ready for use. Okay, so once you've worked out the material quantities that you need, you then need to be able to order the materials and have them ready and on site to go. So if you're going to be doing your concrete, your formwork, because we're talking about formwork first off, if you're going to be doing your formwork on your Friday, then you need to make sure that you've got your materials there ready for Friday morning, so there's no time wasted for deliveries arriving. Some deliveries will happen first thing in the morning, but it's probably better to get the delivery the day before. As well as making sure that you've got all of your formwork, you've also got to make sure that you've got enough pegs or stakes to go into the ground, that you have the tools for doing that as well, that you've got enough screws or nails for holding all of your formwork together. Nails is the most traditional way, but a lot are using screws now because they're easier to remove for when it comes down to stripping your formwork down. Number 7, the last performance requirement, is any environmental requirements for the project are identified within the environmental plans and any statutory and regulatory authority obligations, and that you apply all those. Some of those sort of things could be, we're on a site, we need to make sure that we have silt runoff contained, that we do have dust mitigation factors done so that we're not spreading dust all over the place, that we do have all of our own personal PPE when we're working with concrete dust. Concrete is horrible for your lungs, so you need to be wearing dust masks when you're using cement dust. All signage comes under that as well. Barricades comes under that as well. So this is all identifying before you get into doing the job. This is all just the planning stage. That is just the first element within this competency in this cluster. Okay, I'll do a different video for the second element.